What's going on, ladies and gents, boys and girls, guardians of all ages, Joker back again, once again, and Destiny community, you're kinda weird. So in one of my last videos, Pulled Pork, the plot twist we all saw coming, people actually got offended because I thought the Destiny community was more intelligent than it was? What? Weird flex, guys, but okay. Now, to be 150% clear, that's not me calling anyone who didn't see this plot twist coming stupid. Like, maybe you're just not that invested in the lore. Maybe you just didn't want it to happen and you hoped, you prayed, you were like, no Bungie, don't bring back ULDREN as a guardian. And maybe you just didn't care. Now, there's a lot of valid reasons for not seeing this coming. However, if you got pissed off because I said you should've, well then you're fucking stupid. Not for not seeing it coming, but for getting offended. Because, I don't know, I thought you were more intelligent than you were? Which was clearly a mistake on my part. I apologize. I apologize for finding you people intelligent, or something like that. I'm confused. I don't know what you people want, I'm gonna be honest. But I digress. And perhaps I should demonstrate why this was a fairly predictable plot twist, if you've been paying attention to the story, and more so talk about the evolution of the ULDREN character, and why he's actually well written and possibly one of, if not the best written characters in all of Destiny. Okay, that's actually not saying all that much, but when every other character is a piece of cardboard, you take what you can get. In Destiny, there is a very short list of characters that if they died would be resurrected. That list becomes even shorter when you rule out vendors like Tess, Amanda, Brother Vance. Basically, of the characters in Destiny that are not already Guardians, if they died, I could see these characters coming back. You have ULDREN, Petra, Hawthorne, GamerYnK, and of course the Queen of the Awoken. Though with the Throne World, I don't think we'll see Mara coming back anytime soon, unless it's some weird, she's killed and her soul, her spirit, her consciousness goes back to her Throne World and gets a new body, and her old body is then transformed into a Guardian. Also, I think we can take Hawthorne and GamerYnK off the table pretty easily as well. Sure, they more than qualify, and if they ever died, I wouldn't be surprised to see them come back. However, their stories are more about how people who are not Guardians can help defend the city and make a difference. Making them Guardians kinda misses the point of their story. Petra also more than qualifies as well, but I think you lose a lot of what Petra is if you erase her memory and change her character. Petra's entire character is built on her devotion to the Queen, for the Queen giving her a purpose. So by process of elimination, that brings us to ULDREN. ULDREN is the Jaime Lannister of the Destiny universe, and they actually have very similar, if not identical, story arcs. When the player is introduced to ULDREN for the first time, he's this smug, arrogant, violent jackass who seems to have this incestuous relationship with his twin sister, the only thing he's truly devoted to. Throughout the lore, we see ULDREN doing impulsive and reckless things just to get his sister's attention. He fights his sister's would-be executioner in a duel to the death. He goes to the Black Garden and brings his sister back flowers. He captures a newly risen Guardian. He brings her a baby Ahamkara. He needs to be loved and validated by his sister. He desires intimacy, and this can be displayed by the way the Riven-controlled hallucinations spoke to ULDREN, closely, intimately, whispers in the ear. We also see a lot of touching and caressing. This isn't the sort of closeness you share with a sibling, but with a lover. And it really doesn't matter if they ever had any form of incestuous relationship, because we're talking about ULDREN's headspace here. Him as a character, what he wanted and desired, not necessarily what happened. And outside of his relationship with his sister, everything seems disposable. And if we dive deeper into ULDREN's headspace, he actually has a very conflicted relationship with Guardians. He looks down on the player character and Guardians in general, doing things that we would consider very petty. The card At the Gate, Part 1, gives us a bit of insight to this. Give ULDREN Zov a chance to torment a Guardian, and he will take it faster than you can shout Rasputin shot the Traveler, an opinion he lobs onto Guardians' minds whenever he can. He hates the Traveler's horseflies in the way anyone would hate an infant godling issued with a coloring book morality and whining, know-nothing paperweight. They're self-righteous, cocksure, callously instrumental intruders into a system they do not understand. He hates that the most. The ability to move through the world without caring about how it works. He's done everything to Guardians he can think of. Shoot them up, shoot them down, send them on doom quest, dunk their ghost in intolerably stinky synophenol, drilled holes to bury their obnoxious patrol beacons inside solid rock, trick them into dismantling mighty weapons. But every time he gets into a gunfight, he wonders what it must be like to do this without any sheer raving terror. So we see jealousy and envy. He views Guardians as lesser and foolish because they're blind allegiance to the Traveler, because they can just ignore the way things work. But he also covets that power, because if he had that power, it would better serve him in his blind allegiance to his sister and queen. With that power, he could get the recognition he desires. Part of his hate for Guardians stems from this as well. It was his motivation to take the Black Garden because, quote, if we don't do it, some Guardian will. And the next thing you know, Mara will be inviting them to do Crow's work. Which is essentially what happens after we destroy the heart of the Black Garden. We have the Queen's Wrath event, then we have House of Wolves, and so on and so forth. As a bridge between the city and the reef was built, the less use that Mara had for ULDREN, at least in ULDREN's mind. And when ULDREN does break into the Black Garden, we get this quote, but ULDREN can't stop imagining how astonished Mara would be at this place. What if he could bring her here? What if they could explore this place together? We can see ULDREN's need for attention and validation again in After the Heart Part 1, which reads, Mara, I picked you flowers. The Queen's retinue parts before ULDREN, astonished eyes flickering between his face, his wounds, and the potted flowers cupped in his hands. Some of them see a madman, and they reach for weapons before they remember, this is ULDREN, Prince of the Awoken, beneficiary of the Queen's limitless indulgence. Asphodela is the name. He kneels and offers it to his sister. It grew only in the Black Garden until today. We will plant it here, in our domain, where it will take root and flourish. It will remind the people of our twin heritage. For a terrible moment, Mara is unreadable. Then she smiles and beckons. Our brother has obtained the Black Garden and returned to us. Come forward. She peels a single petal from the flower and lays it across her fingertips, holds it up to the light. Magnificent. Ilian, see to it. She passes it off. ULDREN swallows protest. He hoped she might plant it herself. Afterwards, in private, she's silent and still. He tells her everything he remembers. Did you see the heart? She asks softly. ULDREN and Mara are old. Centuries, if not millennia old. But for the lion's share of this time, Mara has used ULDREN, but kept him at an arm's length. In After the Heart Part 2 we read, whatever the heart of that place is, he says pacing, it's a seed, I think. A seed left behind to grow, like a note of glimmer, or the idea strikes him like a thunderbolt, or a tripwire, bait to attract those who would seek out and destroy what they do not understand, bait for Guardians, bait to mark some milestone in the Traveler's recovery. I told you to never go there, Mara says. Her eyes burn. She draws her cloak tight. Are you not devoted to me? Sister, he says, of course I am. Yet you defy me. Yes, ULDREN thinks. Yes. Aren't those the same thing? How could you care at all for something that never surprises you? He feels, suddenly, utterly, alone. ULDREN thinks to himself, he wants his sister's approval. He knows and accepts that, but he wants her approval for something that she did not anticipate, did not plan or foresee, and did not account for. He wants her to thank him with surprise. His mentality seems to be, if you hurl yourself away from someone to test the length of your chain, you cannot know the chain's length until it draws you short. Does that make sense? ULDREN thinks so. ULDREN is afraid so. Either he is truly free of his sister, free to choose to stand at her side, to choose of his own free will, or the chain is longer than he's managed to run. ULDREN's seemingly suicidal need for love and attention and validation is in large part Mara's fault, as we see in Ravalanche 3 in a conversation between Mara and Jur Ido. Take a listen. Maybe that's your problem. She flicks ULDREN in the chest, leaving a purple bruise fading. What is it with you two anyways? You never talk about him. You never seem to think about him at all. But he's dashing himself to pieces for you. How do you live as his favorite and only sister for so many centuries and hardly ever smile at him? Secrets, Mara thinks. You've got to have secrets from each other, so there's room for him to fill in the gaps with his own happy illusions. Two ships joined together rigidly will tear each other apart if they try to move, but a loose tether leaves some room to maneuver, and can be more quickly disengaged if necessary. So for all her strength, all of her force of will, all of her power. Mara is still very insecure, and no discussion on ULDREN would be complete without talking about his other half, his twin sister, because she is such a significant part of who he is and why he does what he does. Contrary to the strong and competent warrior that we see, Mara, she's broken. Through fate, she was given this power that she never asked for that connects her to all the Awoken. She was made queen because of this. Something she never wanted but was forced upon her. But she's not looked at as a queen or a leader by her people. She's looked at as a god. This would all come to a head with her one-time would-be executioner turned bodyguard, then lover, Jur Ido. The relevant passage reads, "This is when Jur Ido, having spoken to Keda Wei-Deg and to Izella, at last came before her queen. Kneeling, she said, 'Your Majesty, Keda Wei-Deg says you are a god, for there is no difference between your desire and reality. Yet, I know that you desire things before they ever become real. Izella says that you are keeping a secret from your brother, that he must never know. I think this secret is thus. You are now a god because one day you will become a god, and a god is not temporal. Your brother is not a god because he will never become a god. Shall I worship you?' Jur, Mara said, falling to her knees, clutching her beloved's face between shaking hands. Jur, on the day you worship me, you cannot love me anymore. For to worship is to yield all power, and I cannot love what has no power over me." We're told that, although in time the knowledge of what Mara would become pushed them apart, it was a kind and happy push, as a friend might urge a beloved companion onward to a distant opportunity. And again in Tyrannicide 2, we get another glimpse of the more unsure, vulnerable Mara, one who shows regret. First of all, Mara went into the garden and planted a flower for her mother, who she thought must still live, though she might by now have forgotten her first daughter and her first son. "Mother," she said, "I asked to be your sister rather than your daughter, so I denied you the chance to tell me your secret, the mother truth, that is mapped in the negative space defined by the lies mothers tell their daughters. Well, here are my secrets. I love you. I have always loved you. Without you, I could never have been anything at all." Then she went to speak to her brother, but ULDREN was away on Mars, and she found only his empty chambers, the half-sharpened knives and racks of pistols. She knelt in grief, and touched her hand to the floor where his pacing boots had scuffed the asteroid stone smooth. Was this the shape of their siblinghood now? The pursuit of absences? Mara seems to be an island unto herself. She's burdened with this power and this responsibility that she never wanted, but she has to embrace as a grand player in a great game, for the whole of humanity, not just the Awoken. But at the end of the day, she's still human. She's still alone. She keeps those she loves and cares about at arm's length because she doesn't want to be worshipped like a god by them. Mara's choice in Paramour, Lord Shaxx, speaks to this as well. Shaxx is clearly enamored with Mara, but he's still Lord Shaxx. He speaks to Mara like an equal, not a ruler, not a goddess, not a queen. He yells at her, he destroys her stuff, he's insolent, he's even kinda rude, but he's not disrespectful. He's just Lord Shaxx being Lord Shaxx. He does what he wants, when he wants to do it, how he wants to do it, if he wants to do it, not because he's being told to do it. I think at the end of the day, Lord Shaxx is one of Mara's only indulgences for herself. And it's sorta sad when you think about it, because this indulgence is merely someone treating her like a person, not like a god. I think then that it's this loneliness. The loneliness that comes from having people like Petra worship the ground Mara walks on, and her brother's endless suicidal attempts to gain her favor, that she keeps them at arm's length, because they don't love her. At least she doesn't believe that. They love the idea of her. And she thinks it's a mercy to let them have this illusion of her. And I think it breaks her heart to be near these people that she cares about so much, but only love this idealized version of her. At least in her mind, and well, because of the power she wields, that may be the truth of it. Remember, as Jur Ido pointed out, there's no difference between what Mara desires and reality. But this want to protect herself from heartbreak is a double-edged sword. Mara thinks in Revelanche 3, secrets, Mara thinks. You've got to have secrets from each other, so there's room for him to fill in the gaps with his own happy illusions. Two ships joined together rigidly will tear each other apart, if they try to move, but a loose tether leaves some room to maneuver, and can be more quickly disengaged if necessary. So Uldren does things like go to the Black Garden against Mara's wishes, because in Uldren's mind, defying his sister's orders, but doing it in a way that surprises her, doing it in a way that is beneficial to her, doing it in a way that tries to prove that he loves her, in Uldren's mind, that's the only way he can truly show devotion to her, because how can you love something that never surprises you? Mara knows Uldren is doing all of this to gain her favor, and she probably deep down wants him to, because in a way, that's a validation of her. It's Uldren showing that he will do anything for his beloved sister, but also Mara has it in her head that he's not doing any of this for her. He's doing it for this idealized version of her. She thinks in Tyrannicide 4, so many she will leave behind. Uldren knows nothing of the whole plan. He has kept more and more to himself, building up secrets and schemes. All Mara knows and pities, because he needs Mara to think he can get her attention by keeping secrets from her. And that's because that's how Mara treats Uldren. And so Uldren thinks that that's how Mara wishes to be treated. Here we have the story of two fundamentally broken people. Mara is broken by the curse of godhood, and Uldren, he's broken by the manipulations of his sister. So when Uldren loses Mara, he becomes even more of a broken man. The ideal that had defined every action he had ever taken, that made up who he was taken away from him, and he cracked. He goes from thinking that the only way that Mara could ever truly love him was if he surprised her, to thinking, no, that was stupid, that was foolish. It was never to surprise her, but to be an obedient tool. Riven, of course, takes advantage of this. Riven gives Uldren not only purpose, but the love and affection he craved from his sister. She showed him what he wanted to see, and used him to her own ends. Uldren in this is a tragic character. I made the comparison earlier between Uldren and Jaime Lannister from A Game of Thrones. In the show and in the books, Jaime Lannister starts off as this arrogant, selfish, terrible, violent person who has sex with his sister and throws a 7-year-old child out a window to his death for discovering them.
He saw us.
It's alright, it's alright, it's alright.
He saw us.
I heard you the first time. Quite the little climb, aren't you? How old are you, boy?
10.
10. The things I do for love.
This parallels with Uldren's persona and the killing of Cade, and I would argue that in both situations, neither character had much of a choice. Uldren needed the Barons to take the Dreaming City and to free his sister. His sister's life was far more important and valuable to him than Cade's. Cade, much like Bran, was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. What would you do if it was your life on the line and the life of the ones that you loved, versus the life of a complete stranger? In the case of Jaime Lannister, when he killed Bran, had Bran said anything about seeing Jaime and Cersei together, Jaime, Cersei, their kids, all of them would most definitely be put to death. In the case of Cade and Uldren, Cade had already imprisoned Uldren once, and to do so again would stop Uldren from being able to free and save his sister. At least that's what Uldren thought, and it might have cost him the allegiance of some of his barons. Cade was simply in the wrong place at the wrong time. He was in the way, and he died for it. We have the benefit of hindsight to look back at Uldren's actions and condemn him for it. Because ultimately, Uldren was wrong. He was being tricked. He was mistaken. He wasn't going to free his sister by killing Cade, by storming the Dreaming City, by doing any of what he did. He was a broken man clinging desperately to shreds of hope. He was insane. However, had Uldren freed his sister? Had everything gone according to plan? Well, we'd probably be having an entirely different conversation. Maybe, just maybe, Uldren would have been justified. Going back to our Game of Thrones comparison, at one point, Jaime loses his hand.
Have you got something to say? Careful. You don't want to say the wrong thing. You're nothing without your daddy. Your daddy ain't here. Never forget. Yeah, this should help you remember.
It's in this moment that he loses his glory and his shame, forcing him to, for the first time, take stock of himself. Who is he now, without his hand? This really is a turning point for the character. He loses the only thing that made him worth anything at all. And later on, we get this scene.
Then he turned to his pyromancer. Burn them all, he said. Burn them in their homes, burn them in their beds. Tell me if your precious Renly commanded you to kill your own father and stand by while thousands of men, women, and children burned alive, would you have done it? Would you have kept your oath then? He judged me guilty the moment he set eyes on me. By what right does the wolf judge the lion? By what right?
The Kingslayer!
Jamie. My name's Jamie.
Much like Jamie in the loss of his hand, with the death of Mara, Uldren lost the thing that made him, that gave him purpose. Everything that Uldren was up until that point was made instantly irrelevant the moment he could no longer seek the love and validation that he so desperately desired from the broken sister that kept him at arm's reach. And this shattered Uldren's already fragile worldview. He built an army, then he betrayed it, then he built one that would be even more loyal to him. But more so, he gave in to the darker nature of the Awoken. He became consumed by the darkness he spent centuries keeping in check, that all Awoken keep in check. At some point, through means made unclear, Riven starts whispering in his ear. We're not told the specifics of how this works, but sufficient to say Riven uses the hope that Uldren had for saving his sister, for getting back what made him him, and put him on a path that would ultimately lead him to us, the only one who could kill Riven. Uldren never really had a chance. He was put in a position where he had no other choice. He had to kill Cayde. And this was all the culmination of Savathun's plan to create this perpetual murder machine, starting with the Dreaming City. And this loss of one's identity leads to, in both cases, the death of the character. In Jaime Lannister's case, it was the death of the hardened, not caring, arrogant Kingslayer persona. In Uldren's case, the death was more literal, but how literal can death be in a world with a Deus Ex revive mechanic? For Jaime, this character death would be a transformative vehicle for his character. Jaime would go on to have a redemption arc, one where he tries to do right by his children before they die or are murdered in the TV show. He would honor the vow that he made to Catelyn Stark to find her lost children and send Brienne Tarth after them. He would try to reason with his sister to sue for peace against the threat of the others, and he would ultimately leave her over breaking that vow to help in the coming war, at least in the show. Jaime wants to be remembered not as the Kingslayer that he spent most of his life parading around as, but as a good, loyal, honorable knight. Destiny is a world with a revive mechanism, one that erases the memories of the reborn, one that wipes the proverbial slate clean. However, you can't run from your past. Uldren died scared and alone, railing against those who just couldn't understand what he was doing.
The line between light and dark is so very thin. Do you know which side you're on?
That he had to save his sister, that this was all for Mara. Uldren died a broken man, but he also showed courage, devotion, and he sacrificed himself doing what he thought was right. Uldren wasn't a bad guy. He was a broken man on a mission to become whole again, and he used the only tools he'd ever known, violence and cunning, to try to fix himself, to try to save Mara, to try to make himself whole again. That's why it's so easy to see that Uldren would be revived. His story wasn't over, and he's clearly been set up for a redemption arc. In the lore of Destiny, Uldren will be a unique case. Not only was he reborn in the Dreaming City, where he would have been noticed and taken to the Queen almost immediately, but Uldren was reborn with a lot of baggage. Even if his slate is clean, he has a family. He has people who cared about him, even if they may be conflicted about it like Petra. He's also a Guardian now, and the Vanguard has this policy where Guardians are not supposed to look into their past. But what do you do when that past is an ever-looming present? Not only is Uldren the Crown Prince of the Awoken and the heir apparent if death ever manages to stick to Mara, but he also murdered Cayde 6, the Hunter Vanguard. The Vanguard dare, and whether people liked or disliked Cayde 6 aside, there's no getting around that. But must the son pay for the sins of the father? Uldren is a blank slate. He may share the same face, the same voice, the same meat and the same bone as the man who killed Cayde 6, but he is a new being. He did not kill Cayde 6. And we don't punish sons for the crimes of their fathers, but can the members of the Vanguard, like Zavala and Ikora, and the other NPCs like Amanda, move past the face of the man that killed Cayde 6? Like I said, Uldren was a broken man, raging at a universe that had wronged him, in the only way that he knew how, as the weapon his broken sister wielded him as. But Uldren could return to the jaded, arrogant, broken man he was if forced to pay for crimes he didn't commit, which would really be a tragedy. And what about Mara? Not only has Mara been given a second chance after dying via her throne world, but now she has, with a clean slate, been given a second chance to be a sister. Mara doesn't seem to have grown any since her introduction into the franchise. As a character, she's stunted, more of a plot device than a character. And the new Awoken lore gives us an insight to everything that has led up to that. Mara has become a martyr for her people, a figurehead of aspiration, player in the great game, next to Oryx, next to Savathun, next to Ziva Arath, Panopsius, Callus, the Traveler, and even us. But Mara's also that little girl who railed against her mother, who, centuries later, came to regret it. She's the woman who wanted love and companionship, but had her heart broken as the power bestowed on her by fate turned her lovers and friends into worshippers. She keeps everybody at arm's length and lives alone because she could never live up to their illusion of her. She believes that the illusion of her in their mind is better than anything she could ever actually be. Mara is just as broken as her brother, but she hides it better. She has more important things. She has this idea of saving her people, of saving the universe. She's one of the great players in the great game, but what does she do when the game's over? And she's forced to take stock of herself and everything she's done and sacrificed for the greater good. With Uldren's resurrection, Mara has been given a second chance at forging a relationship with her brother, one not built on arm's length psychological and emotional manipulation, but of love. And maybe, just maybe, perhaps, they can find solace in the fact that Mara may be a god, but Uldren has the capacity to be something greater than a god. Different paths, but both equal at last. And perhaps, maybe, just maybe, Mara won't be so alone anymore. And maybe she can start healing. But hey, those are just my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. And like always, stay frosty.